Hello and welcome to this video about what freedom means to me. A past life I'm going to tell you about will explain how I've come to appear before you here today in this video. The most important thing about freedom that I've learned the hard way is that it's not free. It requires blood, sweat, and tears, and when you win it, you have to guard it with your life. It's that rare and that precious. It's too easy to lose for a promise of something for free. The price is your freedom. What does freedom mean to me? Basically, it means self-reliance. Let me stand on my own 2 feet. Let me take care of my family in my own way. Let me give and volunteer in my community where and when and as I wish. I don't need anyone's permission or overbearing opinions about what I can and can't do, as long as I'm being responsible, law-abiding, and ethical. Only self-reliance allows me to speak my own mind, go where I will, gather with whom I wish, and worship God in my own way. In my last life, I served as a pilot in the Soviet Air Forces during World War II. As a Jew, Russia had been my only escape route when I'd fled Nazi Germany. However, I'd only jumped from the frying pan into the fire. At the end of the war, Stalin ordered that all Soviet military personnel who'd served in Western Europe be sent to forced labor camps to be re-educated. He feared an armed rebellion from those who'd seen a much better and freer life outside of his so-called workers' paradise. I was one of those millions who were rounded up and put on prison trains bound for Siberia. By sheer good luck, I managed to escape the train. I only barely kept out of reach of military posses chasing and shooting at me through the forests. Finally, I managed to steal a small airplane. When you're running for your life, there's only one rule: to survive. Nevertheless, I stole from the state, which itself had stolen all private property and was trying to steal my life. I hoped to make it to Alaska, just across the Bering Strait from Russia. Alas, I was shot down before I could do so, but I died a free man. In this life, I was born about 10 years later in Japan, not too far south of where I'd been shot down. My parents were evangelical missionaries from Canada and the States. When I was only 2 years old, we flew in one of the first commercial airliners to fly across the Pacific Ocean. Taking off from Tokyo, we landed in Anchorage, Alaska. I'd finally arrived where I'd tried to get in my last life. I'd had to die and be born again to get there. But here I am in a new body to tell you the story, although as you can see, it's seen a little wear and tear. As you can well imagine, that lifetime gave me a strong distaste for socialist ideology, with its destruction of ethics so that the most horrible evils can be justified, its displacement of religion with the worship of the head of state, and the rule of a privileged few over the captive market of an enslaved population. I'd seen the worst of it in Germany and Russia. I've observed wherever solutions to problems are attempted by enforcing them from the top down, the results are always many times worse than the original problem. This results in even more top-down tyranny until finally chaos rules. How much better it is when people come together in their communities and solve their own problems from the ground up. This makes for lasting solutions that benefit everyone. But this is against socialist ideology. I witnessed its alarming growth in the West, particularly in my beloved country, Canada. Once known as the true North, strong and free, it's become demoralized as the proud tradition of the rugged self-reliance of its people is destroyed. As disturbing as this specter is, I have reason to believe that it will soon collapse under its own insupportable weight. There is a way to be strong and free again. I'm going to tell you how. It's so simple and subtle that it might take you by surprise. Let's start with a passage from the Shariyat-Ki-Sugmad, the Holy Book of Eckankar. This video is not sponsored by Eckankar, but I've included some links below for more information. In Book 1, page 178, it talks about the Kal force. This is the negative force behind the dark side of human nature. Christians, Jews, and Muslims all know this force as the devil or Satan. Here's what it says. The Kal force performs best in the political and religious arenas, for here it is working with the absolute rule of a single body of consciousness, or that of a single individual. No matter how the system of representation is arranged, there is necessarily an alienation of the liberty and freedom of souls. These systems fail to recognize that although man is a social being and seeks equality, he also loves independence and freedom. The desire for personal property, in fact, springs from man's desire to free himself from the slavery of tribal or state-owned beingness, the primitive form of society. But property, in its turn, can go to the other extreme. It can violate equality and support the acquisition of power by the privileged minority. A passage on the next page explains how the Ek works in countering the effects of the Kal force. The Ek is another word for the Holy Spirit, the divine essence of God, which works through individuals who are open to its guidance in affecting their own world for the better. It also mentions the living Ek Master, a living spiritual master who is the primary channel of the Ek in the world today. The passage reads, "The works of Eckankar are revolutionary and eternal. The Ek changes all things once it is allowed to enter into the consciousness of the individual who is earning his daily living. No matter what the situation may be, or what that individual does, and regardless of his position on the social and economic scale of society, he has become a channel for the Ek to change the environment within his own worlds. The living Ek Master uses him as a sub-channel to pass the power of the Ek into the world and revitalize it, to make important spiritual changes which will reflect in the social, political, and economic stature of man." In these two passages we should note how the Kal force works, mainly through the collective consciousness, whereas the Ek works through the individual consciousness. Therein lies an important secret, for only the individual consciousness can be a vehicle of the power of God. If we go one more page, page 180, we come to a passage that talks about the Mahanta, who is the inner master, God in human form, you might say, whom you can meet when you turn inward to the higher worlds. It also mentions the Sugmad, a reference to God as the Supreme Being. Here's how it reads. "The Mahanta appears again in this world to gather up souls to return to the true heavenly home. Wherever he goes and whatever he does, the great Ek power clears the way like the whirling winds of a storm. It breaks up the old orders and re-establishes the new within this world. Everywhere, the Ek destroys systems established by the Kal forces and injects the spirituality of soul into the social order and spiritual life of man. So it is proclaimed that the path of Ek must be taken. A man's lust for possessions and his mad, desperate scramble for material things have become such that the spiritual work of Ek, granted by the Sugmad, is the only way. Otherwise, this world would be on its way to becoming a veritable desert. The attack on the Kal power continues in the quiet quest for salvation." I love this passage because it reveals the secret of a destroying tyranny. It's not with guns or violent force. Believe it or not, it's nothing more than the quiet seeking of God. In this most subtle but effective way, we will utterly defeat the dark forces that have been let loose in the world today. Hard times cause us to return to our age-old quest for God, forgotten when times were good. When we find God, however, it brings about lasting changes in the world for good, as the Sharia points out. So how do we find God? What's the most effective way to come into contact with the divine power that can liberate us? I am so glad you asked. I'll tell you, it's the Song of Hugh, the most beautiful prayer. Whatever your religion, the Hugh can enhance it. I've explained it in another video, but here's the short version. Hugh is an ancient name for God and also a love song to God. You sing it with a deep breath, like this. Sing it for up to 20 minutes every day as a formal exercise. You can also sing it while working, playing, hiking, or driving, or while trying to fall asleep in the middle of the night. Watch for a dream or other sign that can reveal your next spiritual step. The Hugh can do miracles for you as it's done for me and still keeps doing. You can read more about how the Hugh works in the Shariyat-Ki-Sugmad, Book 2, pages 100 through 104. And that, my friends, is what freedom means to me. It's the freedom and privilege that we can all share as channels of spiritual liberation for our communities, our nations, and the whole world. Thank you for watching.